Hello, and welcome to Coding with Kriller. In today's video, we're going to begin examining the blink function to understand a few bits of basic code. There's a lot of code, and it looks pretty complicated. Let's quickly learn about commenting. About half of this code is comments, so understanding commenting should make this code much easier to understand. See all this colorful code? That's the code that does stuff. However, it can be tough to figure out what the code does, especially if you're new to coding, haven't looked at your code in a while, or got your code from someone else. That's why coders use comments. The comments are the code in gray. Comments aren't read by the compiler, so they don't affect your code, but they can be used by anyone reading your code to understand what it does. As you can see here, there are two ways to comment. The first way to comment can be seen up here in the light gray. To comment like this, simply type a /, then an asterisk, and then press enter. Now you can type whatever you want and it won't be read by the compiler. This type of commenting is especially useful if you want to type large paragraphs. The other type of commenting can be seen here in the darker gray. To comment like this, type 2 /. Now you can write whatever you want, but only on this one line. This type of commenting works better for line-by-line coding, where there are some comments on every line of code explaining what that line does. For example, look at the comments down here. The other type of commenting can be seen here in the darker gray. To comment like this, type 2 /. Now you can write whatever you want, but only on this one line. This type of commenting works better for line-by-line coding, where there are some comments on every line of code explaining what that line does. For example, look at the comments down here. Now that we understand commenting, let's look at the basic structure of the code. All code has three basic parts: the setup, located here, the loop, located here, and the area above the setup and the loop, located up here. Let's start with the area above the setup and the loop. This is the part of the code where you declare global variables. If declare global variables sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook to you, that's okay. I'll discuss this in a later video. Next is the setup. Any code contained in these two brackets will run once at the beginning of the program and then never again for the time the rest of the program is running. As the name suggests, this is where you set up your code. Here is where you set your pins to the correct mode, open the serial port, and more. Once again, all of this gobbledygook will be explained in a later video. Finally, look down here. This is the loop. Here is where you'll be putting the code that fulfills your program's purpose. Any code located in these two brackets will run again and again without end for the entire time your program is running. That said, if you want your code to run only once, simply type in a while true at the end of the loop. While loops will be discussed in a later video as well, but basically what this does is it makes the computer get stuck in a miniature loop so that the whole loop doesn't continue running again and again and again. One last thing about basic coding structure. Every line needs to end with a semicolon. This helps the compiler understand the code you wrote. If you're missing a semicolon, the code won't compile. The Teensy microcontroller has 24 pins. Each pin can either be used to read a sensor's input or send out a signal. This is how it senses and communicates with the outside world. Right now, we aren't using any sensors, and my goal is for you to be able to do a lot of coding without any sensors at all. For that reason, sensors won't be covered for a long time, at least until I've taught everything that you can do without sensors. However, there is one thing of interest that we can use these pins for right now. Pin 13 is hooked up to an LED. Because pin 13 is hooked up to an LED, we can either charge pin 13 to make the LED light up, or alternate between charging and not charging the pin to make the LED blink. Let's take a closer look at the blink code to see how this works. The first thing the code does is create a variable named LED and set it equal to 13. Once again, variables will be covered in a later video, but for this video, just think of LED as meaning pin 13. The next thing the code does is in the setup. It takes pin 13 and sets it to output mode. While input mode allows pins to read voltage, output mode allows pins to send out voltage, which is how we will be lighting up the LED. This is done in the setup because it is setting the pin up for use in the rest of the code. Finally, the blinking is done in the loop. First, the digital write command is used to charge the pin and turn on the LED. Things that are digital can either be on or off, as opposed to things that are analog, which can be on, off, or somewhere in between. However, coding with analog commands is much more complicated, so I'll save that for later. For now, just remember that digital write can be used to turn pins and anything hooked up to them either on or off, with high turning them on and low turning them off. Now that the LED is lit up, it needs to stay that way for a while. Delay commands delay the code from progressing for a certain amount of milliseconds. This delay command is delaying the code for 1,000 milliseconds, or 1 second. During this time, pin 13 remains charged and the LED stays on. Once the second delay is over, the pin is turned off. Finally, the code is delayed for another second, during which the pin remains off, until the code starts over once again. Phew, that was a lot to learn. Now it's time for you to do a bit of coding yourself. Try changing the amount of time in the delay commands in order to make the LED blink faster or slower. Maybe even add in another set of digital write commands and delay commands to make the LED blink in 2 steps. Changing the speed an LED blinks may not be the same as building your own programs, but we'll get there. For now, mess around with this to sharpen your skills and be proud that you're beginning to code. This pandemic created a lot of problems. Nurses are tired, hungry, and stressed. Meanwhile, many people are out of jobs. I'd like to ask you to consider donating to Fuel the Fight. Fuel the Fight is an organization that takes your money that you donate and pays restaurants to make meals for nurses. That way, the restaurants can continue to employ some people, making it much easier for many to survive this pandemic, while also making sure that nurses get the food they need and don't have to worry about lunch when they're performing life-saving operations on patients with COVID-19. It's a really tough time now, and if you have any spare change, please consider this. It could really make a difference.